Yo, what is up, guys? Here today showing you guys how to top the meter, tips and tricks as a rogue. There's a lot of different things that can help you do more damage as a rogue in PvE. So first things first, start with consumables. There's this will actually help you the most, which is roll buffs and consumes. So for consumes, what you're gonna want is, for food, you're gonna want grilled squid, and then you can also get the food buff on top of it if you use the grilled squid and then eat. Let me see which one it is. Cooking dragon breath chili. This will also do damage as well. Occasionally belch flame at enemies. Strike in melee for the next 10 minutes. This will actually stack with your squid buff. As long as you use your squid buff first and then you use this, then it'll give you some extra DPS as well. These two buffs right here, roids, increases strength by 25, lasts 60 minutes. Scorpok increases agility by 25 for 60 minutes. So these are the Blasted Lands buffs. There's quests that you can do that you can repeat. You just can't have multiple of these in your bag, but after you use them, you can go back to Blasted Lands and get more. But basically, when you use one, you have to wait a full hour before you can use the other as well. So obviously, Scorpok's better because you're getting 25 AP and you're getting almost one crit, because one crit is 29 agility and this is 25, so it's basically about one crit. And then this gives you 25 strength, which is just 25 raw AP with no crit. So you can decide which one you want to use depending on what gear you're using or what bosses you're about to fight, because you have to stagger them. You want to use Winterfall Firewater. This gives you 35 attack power. So basically any consume that gives you a certain stat like AP, you can't use any other things that also give you AP. But you can use like Juju Power, which gives you 30 strength. Juju Power actually isn't going to be your best consume. It's actually going to be Juju Might, which gives you, I think, 40 strength. But to get Juju Might, you have to kill the elites in Winter Spring, which is a lot more annoying to get, so it's a lot more harder, and it's not that big of a difference. So I'd say most of the time, just go for Juju Power. And then obviously Mongoose, 25 agility, and get a critical hit by 2% for 1 hour. So it basically gives you 3 crit, because 25 agility is basically another crit, which is pretty insane. Also, you guys are going to want Thistle Tea, of course, just for after your cooldowns wear off. You can use Thistle Tea. Like, obviously you wouldn't want to use Thistle Tea when you have Adrenaline Rush going, because it already increases your energy regeneration rate by 100% for 15 seconds. So you're not going to use something that gives you 100% energy, or 100 energy, while you have that running. But just some rules of thumb, pretty much for any bosses, is that you want to wait for Sunders. Obviously, you're going to do more damage when they have less armor, right? When they got more stacks of Sunder armor. So when they have 5 Sunders, if you want to min-max perfectly, that's when you're going to want to use your Adrenaline Rush and Blade Fury on a single target boss, because that's when they're going to have the least armor, so you're going to get the most out of your cooldowns. So basically, by the time you do like a 3-point slice and dice, so Sinister Strike, Sinister Strike, Sinister Strike, slice and dice, most of the time there'll be 5 Sunders up by then. Hopefully your guild puts Sunders up and up that fast enough. I usually, as a rule of thumb, on most bosses, I always do a 3-point slice and dice, depending on if it's like a solo boss or if there's ads. If it's a solo boss, I usually always do a 3-point slice and dice, and usually have the Sunders up, and then pop Adrenaline Rush first, and then Blade Fury, then go ham on them. And then after your cooldowns wear off, you're going to want to be looking at your energy ticker, and then use your Sinister Strike right at the very end, right? So you get the energy tick, and then Sinister Strike again. And then once you have 0 energy, because you timed it out from your energy ticker, you're going to want a T. So that'll make it so you get the most value out of your Thistle Tea. You'll get the most energy back. Also, a big thing that a lot of people do not do is use a weapon swing timer. And this helps a lot, especially because we're Horde and we have Wind Fury. But you also have things like, Hodge. You have Sword Spec, which all give you a chance to get an extra melee swing, right? So if you get an extra melee swing, it resets your timer, right? So you're going to want to be using Sinister Strike either right here or right here. Because Sinister Strike can proc a Hodge, right? And this is the same with your Eviscerate too. It can proc a Hodge, it can proc a Sword Spec, it can proc, whatever. And if it procs any of that, and also Wind Fury. Wind Fury is like the biggest thing because we're Horde. So if it procs like right in the middle, say it procced right here, you would lose half a swing of your weapons. But if you use a Sinister Strike right here, right, and it causes a proc, you don't actually lose any downtime from that previous swing, right? So this swing will actually go all the way through, because if you get a proc right here, you're not going to get this swing, right? Because it's already going to reset. Once it procs, it resets your timer. So if you want to get the most value out of your Hodge, your Wind Fury, your Sword Spec, you want a Sinister Strike either right here or right here. You don't want to be doing it like in the middle where you'll lose like half a swing, right? Then you'll be losing a ton of DPS. I wouldn't say a ton of DPS. Like it's very min-maxy. If you want to top the DPS as a rogue, it's something that you need to be doing though. I will say that. One other big thing is sappers, obviously. On a lot of bosses, there's ads. Like on Gar, you can cheese fights by running in when they have all the ads stacked around, and you can sapper. And when you sapper, you're going to get a ton of damage immediately. I've gotten like a 2k sapper before on Gar, just from sappering all the ads. The thing you got to worry about, though, is if you sapper all the ads, you either vanish because you're going to aggro all of them because people haven't picked them up yet, or you evasion and then hopefully people pick them up and you can pot. Typically, you do not want to vanish if you're going to do that, because if you vanish, then you won't have vanish when you go into Gar, because as melee you should probably be sitting on Gar the entire time. And then when you go on Gar, you're going to build up a lot of threat from using all your cooldowns, using Thistle Tea, this, that, and the other, right? That you're going to want vanish so that you can pump as hard as possible to reset your threat. Because there's been times where I've vanished because I was going to die to the ads after sappering them. And then I was too high on threat and I kept pulling aggro on Gar, which doesn't really matter for the raid. It's more of if you die, you're not going to be doing any damage, right? So the last thing you want to do is die. And that's why also major healing pods are really helpful, because if you die, obviously, you're not doing any damage. And Whipperroot Tubers, these are really good too. These actually do not stack cooldown with pots, so you could use both of these. You could use this and a major healing if you really had to survive. And then one of the other big things that I kind of already talked about before is world buffs. World buffs are single-handedly going to be the biggest DPS increase for you out of anything. The buffs are just insane. So typically you're going to want Ani buff, you're going to want Ren buff, which you get both in Org, right? Ren buff is on a 3-hour cooldown. Ani and Neff are both the same buff, but they can drop them at the same time. And those are 6-hour CD on those, right? And then there's Songflower, which you get in Fellwood from using one of the cleansed song flowers. So if it's corrupted, then you have to use 2 salves to cleanse it. And if you don't know what that is, there's a whole quest line on it, and I'm sure a lot of people have made other videos on it as well. But basically, you need the salves if you want, 100 HP, and or not for 100 HP chance. Actually, yeah, you do. But you also need it for like your agility enchants on your legs and your helm, because you need to get whipper root tubers for that, which you turn in burning steps, I believe. So that's big as well. Songflower, Ani, Ren buff. You also want the DM buffs, the one that gives you 200 AP, 15% extra health. And then I get the spell crit just for kind of the memes, but I've heard that if you get enough spell crit, your Thunder Fury can actually crit. I've yet to actually see Thunder Fury ever crit, so I don't know if I actually believe it. But we'll see. Obviously, it'd be like a super small percent for it to actually happen. And chances are, if it actually happens, I wouldn't be looking at my log anyway to even know that happened, right? But all the times that I have looked at my log, I've never seen it crit, so I don't know. I don't think it's possible. Maybe it is. Another general rule of thumb, like for people that are dagger spec, you're going to be wanting to stack crit a lot more than swords, because the main DPS that you get as daggers is going to come from backstab, right? And if you're not critting your backstab, you're not going to be doing that much damage. Like, look, this 95 bottom end, 143 top end on a main hand dagger, and then you got a sword which has 207 top end and 138 bottom end. So the bottom end of this sword is almost the same as the top end of this dagger. And that really shows you that, like, just from doing white damage with no backstabs included, swords are going to do a lot more damage, obviously. So the majority of your damage is just going to be coming from spamming backstab and keeping your slice and dice up. Because on every boss fight, you want to have slice and dice up 100% of the time, all right? Because 60, 50 to 70-ish% of your damage is going to be white damage. So to get the most out of your white damage, you need slice and dice up for the majority of the fight, right? And then eviscerate when you can as your swords, and backstab when you can, and eviscerate when you can as daggers. But obviously backstab is going to be the biggest amount of damage for any dagger rogue on boss fights. And then so that means you need to stack crit, right? Because if you're not critting your backstabs, you're really not going to be doing that much damage. Like, I could Sinister Strike a crit for like almost as much as a backstab non-crit. And a Sinister Strike is, let's see how much energy it is. I have a macro, so I can't see right here. It's 40 energy for Sinister Strike, right? Backstab is 60, okay? So I could Sinister Strike, right? And that'd be 80. But you couldn't backstab. You'd have to wait for 1 tick of energy, because each tick gives you 20 energy back. Right, and if you guys don't have this add-on's called Nug Energy, and this add-on's called Weapon Swing Timer. But yeah, it's way more cost-effective to use, or energy efficient to use Sinister Strike than it is backstab. But that's why you stack a ton of crit. So when you crit your backstab, it does a lot more damage, and it makes it worth, right? And there's a ton of different things within. I'm sword spec right now, but I'm spec for BWL, so I'd take Imp Backstab, because on Veil, even though I'm swords, I still equip this in my main hand. I backstab every time, because you get 100% energy regeneration, and backstab will always give you way more value. If you want to top the meters on Veil, the best thing to do, if you have a really good guild, that is, you want to go backstab. Well, first you wanna pre-pop you wait 2 seconds for your tank to get aggro, right? Pre-pop Blade Fury, backstab, backstab, slice and dice, and then from there on out, you just only backstab. Do not eviscerate, do not do anything, just backstab the whole way through. And this is going to vary depending on how good your guild is, right? You might not want to vanish right away before after the slice and dice. If you have a really good guild, I would vanish right after the slice and dice and just go all out backstab. But if your guild's not that good and you guys have threat problems, I would just be backstabbing, 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 staring at tiny threat. And then right before you pull threat, you vanish, and then you just go ham. Just backstab, backstab all the way through on Veil. And that'll make you do the most damage. And so as swords, right, you're going to value AP a lot more than you're going to value crit. So you're going to be stacking as much AP as possible. See, like you can get from this right here, these blue set, it gives you 40 AP from the 2 set. This chest is insane. It gives you 76 AP, which is just nutty, honestly, compared to like the Night Slayer chest, which gives you 39 AP. But the thing about the Night Slayer chest is it gives you 2% crit, which you don't get with this. So you really got to play around with what world buffs you have, what other buffs you have, like how much crit do you want. And the rule of thumb is I think the max crit is 45% with world buffs and everything. So if you're at 45%, that's the crit cap from what I've heard. So if you're at 45, I would stop stacking more crit and just start stacking more AP. If you're daggers, usually as a sword rogue, it's gonna be hard for you to get to 45 AP unless you're like using full Night Slayer, which I usually don't do just because I get more DPS out of using like the 2 set from this and getting 40 AP and then getting this AP as well. But yeah, so you're just gonna want to stack as much AP as possible because all your damage as a sword rogue is basically going to be white damage and then eviscerates, right? So you just want to get keep slice and dice up 100% of the time, and you want to use eviscerates when it's not going to make your slice and dice go off, because you want slice and dice up the whole time. But the thing is also, you need to be paying attention to how much combo points you have and how much longer the fight you think is going to last, right? Because if I hit a 5-point slice and dice when he's at 10% health, you know, a 5-point slice and dice is like 30 seconds or something like that. Obviously, the fight's not going to go on for 30 seconds. So it'd be better in that case to eviscerate and then do like a 1-point slice and dice out of that, or like a 2-point, depending on how long you think the fight's going to go on. Basically, you don't want to waste combo points. You don't want to end a fight with like, you know, like more than 5 seconds of slice and dice up, because that means you're wasting combo points on not eviscerating. So it's kind of like a balance thing. You kind of got to understand how long the boss fights work. Obviously, it's really hard to be perfect on this, but that's just one thing that you'll pick up on from doing the bosses over and over again, and you get more comfortable with your guild. You'll understand how long the boss fight's going to be, so then you'll know how many points of slice and dice you're going to do at what point in time, right? And that'll help you maximize as a sword rogue. Yeah, just stack as much AP as possible, you know, get all your world buffs, you know. You still obviously want like a decent amount of crit, but you'll get a lot of crit just from, you know, some of the tier pieces. Like I can show you guys what I would PvE in right now. Let's see. Bloodfang pants, helm. Where's that? So I use 2 set of, I need to put that on. So I use this 2 set that gives me 40 AP. So right now I'm at 854 AP. I get this 2 set. I'm using 2-piece tier 2. I'm using 2-piece tier 1. I'm getting the bunch of AP from this chest right here. I'd probably replace this with the T2 chest if I got it, just because it gives you 2% hit, which is pretty insane. And then this is the War Song bracers, which give more AP than Night Slayers. So Night Slayer gives you 20 agility, so that's 20 AP, and then 2/3 crit basically, so around 66% crit. So this gives me 1 less agility, so a little bit less crit, but it gives me 10 more AP. So it's definitely better than the tier 1 bracers. But the tier 2 bracers give hit, so you could argue that the tier 2 bracers are better than this, but I think that these give more AP than the tier 2 bracers as well. And then I think I'm rocking 6% hit off of my gear. I get gloves are 1%. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. So I get 6 from my gear, 5 from my talents. So I'm currently PvEing with 11% hit. The soft cap for your abilities, so like your sinister strikes, your eviscerates, and everything, you want to be at least 9% if you want to land all those. But like your actual white swings, your white swing hits, you can't even really reach the cap for it. It's like in the 30% or something like that for your white swings. So honestly, you want to just stack as much hit as possible, because then you'll hit more of your white swings. But if you don't really care about that and you just want to make sure that you're hitting all your abilities, just have at least 9% hit, and you'll get 5 from talent, so you only need 4 from gear, right? And then obviously one thing that's pretty self-explanatory is make sure you're behind the boss or mobs when you're hitting them, because then they cannot parry and they cannot dodge, but you can still miss because you don't have, max hit for your white swings, which is whatever, 40 something or in the 30%. I heard it's like 30 to 35% or something like that, but I don't think there's like an exact number because you can't actually even hit it, right? But also there's bosses where like I don't know, like I would value using this over Thunder Fury just because this gives a lot more stats and the overall DPS is higher. And it also gives me 15 agility. I have Crusader on this just because I PvP with it. In general, double Crusader is better for burst for PvP, and then if for PvE, you're gonna want 15 agility on your offhand. So like on Veil, like since I'm going dagger spec and I'm gonna be spamming backstab, I put on 5-piece Night Slayer for the extra energy and the extra crit, and then I also put this on over my Thunder Fury for the extra crit and the AP. But all in all, just make sure you guys are getting world buffs. Make sure you guys are using the right consumes. Make sure if you're going daggers to be stacking crit. Make sure if you're going swords to be stacking AP. And you guys should be fine. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. But yeah, wait for them sunders before you pop all your cooldowns. Typically speaking, you want to use these together so you can get the max DPS out of them. But you also gotta, if it's a boss fight that has ads, right? You want to make sure you're cleaving the shit out of them. So you gotta have your Blade Fury up and your Adrenaline Rush up on those ads. Make sure the tanks are stacking the ads well. And try to maximize as much as you can with your Blade Fury, because a lot of the big difference on fights that have ads are who gets the most value out of their Blade Fury, right? And typically, on like Domo or something, they'll take the first 2 ads together. So I usually get like a 2-point slice and dice, because if you get a 3-point slice and dice, by that time you've wasted so much time getting slice and dice up that like the first ad is already like half dead, and then you wasted that much health just on not cleaving them. So you really want to maximize your cleave. On some of the ads, that'll be like a 1 or 2 point slice and dice to make sure that you're getting the most value out of your Blade Fury. But on like bosses, I would say, where it's just single target, I'd say a rule of thumb is like 3 point slice and dice. So sinister strike, sinister strike, sinister strike, slice and dice for swords. For daggers, I'd say probably 3 as well. Even though you're using backstab, you'll get your slice and dice up a little bit slower, but you'll still get the extra DPS from the backstabs. So all in all, if you guys have any more questions on maximizing DPS, feel free to leave it in the comment section below.